Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, where we go after shame every way we can, especially religiously, sexually, or from a mental health lens. So that's what we're about here at this podcast. And today I'm thrilled to have two of my colleagues and interns, Amy, Roy, and Lindsay Ferguson, joining me today. And we're going to be talking about faith transitions, since that's an area that we specialize in quite a bit at our group practice. And excited to let you all, the audience, get to know them as they're starting their careers and coming on board to help us with the many, many issues that seem to come up in faith transition land for so many people. So welcome to the program. I'm so excited to have you both.
Thanks.
Yeah, I thought I would give you each a little bit of a chance to just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about where you're at, where you're going to school, what program you're going to school for, what brought you maybe into the interest of mental health profession. You both, this is kind of like a second half of life type of career option for both of you. So let's see, Amy, do you want to get us started?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, definitely a second part in life career transition for me. I loved working with college students before. I had my master's in higher ed leadership and just loved working with college students and as they're in a pivotal place in life in moving forward. But it was my faith journey that really got me moving forward in this particular area. I had my undergrad in psychology as well, and for a while, I thought about being a therapist, but it wasn't until some things happened for me. What sparked my faith crisis was my mom passing away in her sleep one night out of nowhere. And she literally just had a cold, and my dad noticed she couldn't breathe. What was going on? And it didn't coincide with some things that she was told in her patriarchal blessing. And so for a while, I did not like the word faith. It bothered me. And then there's also that level of it bothered me that it bothered me because I was always so strong in the faith and worked so hard in having a really solid testimony. And so Natasha, I really don't remember what it was that I Googled, but something about patriarchal blessing didn't come true, but later made sense, something to that effect. That's when some things came up about Joseph Smith's dad being the first patriarch of the church and giving these blessings that they were going to serve a mission on the moon. Wait, what? I'd never heard of that before. And I was I knew my stuff in the church. I'd gone through the CES Seminary teaching program. I taught Institute, but I'd never heard of that before. And that's what opened up the whole rabbit hole, basically, for me in going there and thought, well, that can't be true. And then I found out more. Well, that can't be true. And then I found out more. And this all happened around the same time that Jeremy Reynolds came out with his CES letter. And I remember being so grateful and meeting him and just thanking him for putting in such a great summary of the questions that we had. And at that time, I started drinking a little bit to help numb the pain for me personally, because I thought, well, it's legal. By the time I left the church, I thought it was legal. I wasn't doing anything wrong morally. I wasn't hurting anyone else. And it helped me numb some of that pain and then other traumas that it numbed until it really hurt. It got to the point that I needed to get some professional help, and I did. And that was part of what got me to think, wow, I need to become a therapist because there is so much in my journey. And I wanted to be able to pay it forward and help others navigate their own faith journeys, and including for some people recovery, because in the whole Mormon world, we're not taught how to like safely drink, and don't drink this, don't drink enough. There's so many things that you learn, most people like in college, that wasn't the case. Wasn't the case for me. Having graduated from BYU, and I did that whole scene, and it was just interesting to navigate those new waters. And I feel like I'm probably not alone in that. There's other people out there that I could potentially help.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to dive in a lot more into some of these things that you've talked about today, because there's a lot of common themes, right? So like sometimes there's an experience in life that doesn't quite fit the narrative of the faith tradition, and so the death of your mother. And for those of you who are not from LDS culture, we both, Amy and Lindsay, do come from a Mormon background, and so some of the language that we'll be sharing is kind of LDS-esque. And so when Amy was referring to patriarchal blessing, that is a tradition in our faith, in our faith community of usually around the time of emerging adulthood, somewhere around there, there's a special blessing where a patriarch, a leader in the church who's been given that responsibility, will lay hands and offer a special, like a prayer, basically. And it's, I guess the best way I can explain it to non-members is kind of almost like a horoscope type of blessing. Like, here's some things that we assume will happen in your life. And for some people, these blessings tend to be pretty generic. And when we compare them to other people's blessings, they kind of have some similar things. And for some people, there's very unique things, everything from what you should do from a career as to who you should marry, to whether or not you're going to have children, whether or not you're going to, attend a mission. And so if these things are predicated in this patriarchal blessing, a lot of LDS members see it as kind of like, oh, that's a path, that's a roadmap. Those are things that will happen to me. And if it doesn't come true, like in Amy's case with her mom, that can lead to questioning and doubting and like, well, what does that mean? And for example, if you've been promised that you'll have children, but you're dealing with infertility, or, so there's lots of examples of how this comes up in our practice, where people are wrestling with what was shared with them and their patriarchal blessings, and whether or not they agree with it, whether or not they felt pressured to make certain decisions because of those blessings, and whether or not the blessings were actually accurate. I just want to explain that. So thank you and then, substance use and all those things we'll dive in. So before we do that, Lindsay, why don't you give us a little bit of an intro as far as what brings you to the table?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Lindsay. I am doing a master's of social work program through Louisiana State University, which I'll be graduating in May. Yay. It's coming. Only have 2 classes left, so that feels awesome. I have 4 kids, ages from 17 to my twins just turned 11, so 2 days ago. So I've got 4 kids. I've been married for 20 years. Just grew up very LDS, just here in Utah in the Salt Lake Valley. And I went to school. I did my undergrad, majored in communications and minored in human development and family studies. And I actually was so drawn to those classes. I was trying to figure out a way, like, could I major in this? What could this be for a career for me? But I just didn't ever really consider that I could go do a master's. I was married when I turned, I was 20, but I was pretty young, it was a little bit before I turned 21. So it was kind of like, I need to graduate so I can get a job and start earning money and we can save up and have kids. And, so I was always drawn to those communications classes that was like interpersonal communications. And looking back, I'm like, oh, it was like, I was trying to learn more about having communication, healthy communication patterns with people in our lives, which is so much what we do in therapy. But I have come to accept that that was actually a good path for me. But that is part of deconstruction, is accepting our past and kind of where we're at now. And so, life unfolds, and it ended up working out. And I just was still continue to be drawn to psychology and, human relations and things like that, and listening to podcasts all the time. And then, going through my own faith journey, even more so, learning how psychology and things like that impact, belief and deconstruction. And it was so interesting to me. And I just started, thought on it for a couple of years before I really decided to go back and get my master's. But because it was a big decision for me, like doing school, also raising 4 kids. And I could have gone back and got a degree in communications. I had worked in the business profession and actually for a tech company for several years. And there was different opportunities, I think, there that could have been, but I just felt really drawn to this. So I'm just really grateful to be here. I found Natasha through my kind of deconstruction journey and saw her speak at an event in 2019 and just really loved her, and just felt super lucky that she gave me an interview and I'm here. So that's my background.
Okay. And so remind me, when did you start deconstructing? How long ago was that for you?
Well, I'll share a little bit more, but back in like 2013, some shelf items, and really looking back even early, like first couple years of marriage, just little things. But when I really started facing kind of the bigger issues was probably like 2018, 2019. But I feel like it was an ongoing thing for like several years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Which is, it's so interesting to hear people's faith transition journeys. For people, it's like, oh, it's been a slow burn. It's been, I've been questioning for 10 plus years, and I don't even know if I'm fully transitioned or cooked or whatever language we're going to use. And then there's people that referencing the CES letter, for example. I read the CES letter in a weekend and I was out. I was done, and so it's like, it's like, okay. So there's a lot of, most people land somewhere in the middle of those two extremes, but it is definitely a very unique individual experience to go through a shift of belief systems, which is, maybe something I'll share here at the very beginning is that although a shift in belief system is not a mental health disorder, it does show up as a coded reason why people might be struggling, right? So in the DSM, there is a spiritual struggles type, code. It is not a code that insurance will pay for. So it's not that type of a code. And it's not because insurance will only pay for mental health disorder treatment, right? So, but it is a code in the back of the DSM of a list of potential things that can actually lead to mental health disorder, right? And we do know that many people who go through an event as significant as a shift of your entire belief system, that can affect them, things like depression, anxiety. It can either cause those things to start happening, or if you've had some of those things before, like maybe OCD or whatever, it will exacerbate those disorders. So that's why we care about faith transitions from a mental health lens a lot, and there's a lot of interplay. Plus, of course, some people go further from just distress to actually religious trauma. So now we're talking about a PTSD diagnosis or a CPTSD diagnosis being potentially applicable as well. So these are things I like for people to understand. So 1, they don't feel alone. 2, they don't feel crazy. And 3, they understand the implications of how this can really affect their wellness. All right. So I think there's basically 3 main themes that we discussed that we're going to touch on today, because it really, you're both very kindly and, willingly to share some of your own personal experiences and how that organizes your way of thinking of faith transition. So 1 is LGBTQ journeys. So we're going to talk about that and how that impacted both of your lives. We're going to delve a little bit more into substance use because Amy's willing to talk about that very openly. And we're also going to talk about some parenting things, right? Because Lindsay is a mom of 4. Like, how does faith transition individual faith transition then affect, relational things such as marriages or parenting. So do we want to start a little bit then with kind of, I think that both of you mentioned that LGBTQ journeys had a big impact on the breaking of the shelf, as we might talk about. Lindsay, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, sure. So back in, I think it was around 2012, 2013, first I'll say where I was in the church at that point. When I was 27, I was called to be young women's president in my ward, which was a big deal for me because I had never had a leadership calling before. I had 2 little kids, and it was just a big responsibility for me. But it was interesting because when Amy was bringing up patriarchal blessings, my patriarchal blessing specifically said I would work with the young women of the church. So I felt like, oh, this is I must be living right, because right, isn't that kind of the messaging that we get? Like if we're living right, then the things in our patriarchal blessing will come to pass. And so I felt really like kind of honored for that role, and just that they would trust me with that, but also that like there must be something more going on here with my plan. So I took that, pretty seriously. I kind of have that personality. I dive into what I'm doing and get passionate about things. And I loved working with the youth, and it was a great experience for me in a lot of ways, but it was also, a lot of time sacrifice. I kind of didn't know what I was doing, and intimidating because I live in the same ward that I was in then. And we moved in kind of as a younger couple in this ward with a lot of families with many kids. And I was kind of maybe one of the youngest in the ward. So it was just intimidating, but I took that role, and I feel like I did a pretty good job, did the best that I could. But further into when I was serving in that role, my sister, who is 4 years younger than me, came out to me as lesbian. Well, not just to me, but to my family. And I was not shocked. Like it didn't surprise me when she told me. But at the same time, I could not make sense of it, because I was just like, how does this work with the plan? Like at the time, in 2013, there, even in broader culture, and I was probably pretty sheltered, I don't feel like it was talked about as much, so I felt this heaviness because like at church, I was teaching one thing, but personally, I was starting to have the shelf item of like, my sister's one of the best people I know. If you want to talk about pure in heart, she's one of the purest people I know, and good people. And also, I'm not shocked that she's lesbian. Like it doesn't come as a huge surprise to me. So how do I make sense of this? So that was early on. And then that continued to be a shelf item for me for a couple of years. And it was toward the end of when I was Young Women's president. And I remember there was some talk about, just LGBT. I feel like Prop 8 had happened a few years before. And so sometimes there was talk about those things at church, and it just started to become really heavy for me to hear that kind of language, these discussions happening in the church setting, because I don't really know how it is now because I haven't been for 5 years or so consistently, but a lot of demonizing of that group and making it seem like they were evil and this was the way of the world. And, we need to fight this, this cultural shift that's happening because marriage should be between a man and a woman. And I just could, that anxiety of being in those spaces and feeling like I wanted to raise my hand and say, actually, I have a sister that's lesbian and she's like one of the best people I know, and she's not evil and she's a good person. But I couldn't sadly, like I didn't have the bravery back then to do that. So I just sat in that anxiety. And so Natasha, when you brought up the mental health things that come into that, I had a lot of anxiety through my faith transition, and not just for that, but for other things that ended up unraveling too. That then led to some depression, because I think when I finally accepted that this wasn't going to work for me anymore, it was a couple of years of feeling really disappointed and sad that because this was my life, like I was an all in. I was the girl that read the Book of Mormon front to back at age 13 and did not miss my prayers one night and wrote in my journal every night. I was as committed, I was as committed as they get. So this was, a real unraveling for me. That was a little long.
No, not at all. I think that whether you are gay, queer, lesbian, bi, however you might identify, and you're sitting in these pews yourself, absorb all of these messages, which I think sometimes I feel like we forget that we have members of the church who are queer, because we almost talk about them like they are out there, and we don't realize, no, that people are right here in front of us, especially minors who haven't maybe figured out their identity or found language for their identity yet, and or they are very aware, but they're internalizing these messages. And then, of course, secondarily is all of the rest of us, who are in relationship with gay, queer, bisexual, lesbian, trans members, and whether we're landing, how that's landing, that it feels like we have to make a choice, right? Of, am I going to stand for what's right according to the gospel and not accept, my family's identity journey? Or am I going to accept, kind of like you, Lindsay, I am accepting my sister's journey. And now it doesn't feel good to have my faith community characterizing my sister in a way that doesn't feel, authentic and even harmful. I've been editing some chat. I'm working on my kind of semi-memoir about my excommunication and all that. So I've been just reviewing the chapters on what I got in trouble for, quote unquote, what I got in trouble for. And one of them was that I had said that the church is a toxic place for LGBTQ members, right? And I remember even in one of the conversations with my stake president at the time, he's like, do you really believe that the church is toxic? And I was like, yeah, hell yeah. Hell yeah, I do. Do you not believe that? How do you all sit with the cognitive dissonance, right? That you can say an entire group of people is, sinners and evil and think that that's a healthy place? But that's, I think, the cognitive dissonance that a lot of times we do have as churchgoers, is that kind of whole love the sinner but hate the sin mentality does not land in a mentally healthy space, quite frankly. And we have lots of research to support that. So it just, as you're talking about that, it reminds me that this has been something I've been sitting with my entire career. I mean, gay people started showing up in my clinic, in my practice, year one back in 1997 now, I want to say, is when I started practicing. Even before that, because I saw quite a few gay people in my internship, because I was part of a medical internship where actually it was serving HIV clients. So even though it wasn't from my faith community, I was serving the gay population from the very beginning of my career. And whether it was in evangelical Kansas, or if it was in LDS Utah, or if it was in Lutheran Wisconsin, kind of the main places I lived in, these messages were harming my clients and their family members. So thank you, Lindsay, for that. And I know, Amy, you've got even kind of a very interesting story. So go ahead and tell us your part of it.
In my marriage, I was married for 5 years, and I too have a child. I have a daughter. She's 20, but she's in college now. And while in Boston, we met, and I found out he was in the closet. I found the porn while married 6 months in, and I saw what he went through with going to church and wanting so desperately to basically, you hear it, to pray the gay away. He thought that he was doing everything right, and I saw how badly he wanted to be straight because he was married to me, and how heartbreaking that was. And fortunately, I was able to help him a little bit when I did have all the research that I found. And because I did 2 years of very extensive research, that was how it worked for me, because I was just so thorough. So for me to be okay with leaving, I needed to know for sure, for me. And but I was able to help him through that, and our daughter as well, because you bring up parenting, Lindsay. I remember when I was going through all of this, my daughter was turning 8, and I thought, she wants to be baptized. What do I do with this? And I remember her saying to me once, Mommy, how come you keep reading so many books? Because I was doing so much research and I thought, how do you answer this question when she's 8 years old? And I thought, well, you know how in the olden days they used to teach that the earth is flat? I found out some things, so I need to learn what's real so I can teach you what's real. So she's like, okay, mommy, keep reading. I thought, oh my goodness. It was amazing how she had that insight that I was doing some important reading. And but it was nice to be able to help my ex-husband then at the time, but going through it, it was gut-wrenching pain that I saw him experience. And I kept that to myself as well until the actual divorce, because I didn't want him to be treated differently. I didn't want him to be treated less than. And I was highly suspect that that would happen if I were to get that out. So the divorce was a huge surprise to everybody. Like, wait, what? What's going on? Because we had a great relationship in every other way. It was that whole not being able to make it work in a mixed orientation marriage when we both wanted something different. So it was interesting experience to live through. And that was, I think, another part of why I wanted to become a therapist, because I saw just how much can happen. And having lived through these things myself, I just wanted to be able to utilize that life experiences as we're helping others navigate some tricky experiences and pain and all of the above that can come with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, mixed orientation marriages are very, very common, in particular in high demand, high control religions, because, and as I don't know that I have to explain this, it's probably it makes sense that if you grow up in a culture and a system that does not allow you to identify as anything other than cisgender or heterosexual, that you learn pretty early through what we know to call group dynamics is that in order to stay safe, I need to suppress very, important aspects of my identity, because if I don't, I will potentially be kicked out of the group. And we actually formally do that, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There's formal excommunication or disfellowshipment, that basically sets you aside from the rest of the group until you quote unquote repent and, see the light and come back to the box that we've decided everybody needs to fit into. And so when you fit into the box, it's not, it can actually be a protective factor to be part of a religious community, because there's a lot of community aspects of that are very helpful and supportive to people's lives. But when you don't fit into the box, now you are hiding, to the point that it sounds, Amy, you didn't know he was gay when you got married. And so now you've got a pretty big relational dilemma there for both of you. And even as go ahead.
It was an interesting thing to go through, and at the time, and then process some things after leaving the church, because there was a time when, before we were officially engaged, he told me that he used to be attracted to men. But ever since I'd come around, ta-da, it was like the miracle he had always prayed for. And I thought, pretty sure that's not possible. But at the time, I'm thinking, am I going to say God cannot make a miracle happen? So I felt like I was choosing between believing God or thinking my education could be trumped by this miracle that could happen. That because later in conversation, he wondered if he was bi, because he had never been attracted to women before, but he was actually attracted to me. So it was very confusing for him. And at the time I thought, well, and I remember getting a blessing. I was so torn, like, what do I do? In the end, I thought, I'm going to believe that miracles can happen. And then it was 6 months in that I found the porn, that was my moment of realization of, it's not in the past. This is what is going on right now. But I was so embarrassed of the fact that I got married to someone that said to me, I used to be attracted to men, because of course you can't say it's gay, it's same-sex attraction.
Right.
but I thought, well, who am I to doubt?
Yeah.
You're supposed to doubt your doubts, right? And so that was another part of me processing some things as I was leaving the religion and trying to sort through everything that I needed to sort through.
Yeah, and a few things I'll hit there on, even the miracle language, right? Like that's how we're taught to think about it. Like, why would it be like that's so harmful, right? To think of it as like, oh, if so from the religious lens, if you're gay or lesbian or bisexual or trans, the idea is that needs to be shifted, cured, right? And that's where the miracle language comes from, right? It's like, oh, it's a miracle that you are no longer your own identity. And so you can see just how, yes, like younger Amy was in that mindset, right? Of having to wrestle with those kinds of ideas. And then it also it ignores the fluidity, right? Because maybe he was slightly bisexual or whatever, but that doesn't mean that his gayness went away, And so that's
right.
By erasure, that you're only allowed to, feel or exhibit behaviors around the orientation that is accepted by the group, right? But the other part of it you need to hide away, and so, but. You are both, I'm guessing, very unequipped as young members of the church to understand any of these things and to try to make sense of them and to make a lifelong decision such as marriage from such an unequipped space and harmful space is just setting you both up for so much failure. Yeah. So so Lindsay, like family members that are dear to you that are coming out. Amy, you're in a mixed orientation marriage. Like it is, although, the LGBTQ population, I think is somewhere around the 7 to 12% part, somewhere around there of the population. When I hear anecdotally, and I think Jenna Reese even has some research on this, is that not that it plays a role in everybody's faith transition, but something to do with the LGBTQ community plays a role in many faith transitions, including straight parents, friends, family. And also I think generationally, it's just not so, generationally, it seems incompatible, with the younger generations who are kind of just more naturally affirming and, see diversity from a very different lens than some of us older folks that grew up in the 80s and 90s with a lot of homophobic, not just religious ideas, but cultural ideas as well. So
even when it came to parenting, Lindsay, you mentioned parenting in this, and I thought, hey, trying to normalize for my daughter, I'm like, let's watch Modern Family, thinking, when is he going to come out to her? Because that took a while. So I was trying to do what I could to normalize things like that and make it so that it's normal, it's okay. And when he's ready for that, he will, move forward as he decides is best for him and for us all together. But yeah, trying to normalize that with our upbringing being different, be a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and we don't have time for this today, but as I'm noticing a very common thread here in your story, Amy, is that the straight spouse doesn't have a lot of room to grieve or to do their own processing because they are oftentimes in that protective kind of stance of helping their spouse come out, and because that's such a big thing. But you're also going through your own tragedy in that, so the gay person is like kind of in pride mode, like I'm going to come out and be who I am. And the straight spouse is trying to support that, but it's also at the cost of their own tragedy of what is happening to the relationship. So it's very complicated. Let's dive into substances. So this is another one, right? Not all high demand religions have prohibitions on substances like alcohol, coffee, tea. Many of them do, especially alcohol. In LDS land, we also include coffee, tea, in those things. And of course, anything that would be considered illicit, cannabis, psilocybin, cocaine, all the different, drug families. And which is also an interesting thing right now because we're kind of moving culturally even to be more accepting of cannabis, as far as both medically and recreationally. And we are moving even with the research on psychedelics, that's starting to really kind of have an impact on mental health treatment protocols, etc. So, and I think when I think of a classic LDS faith transition, it's kind of like, oh, this was so silly. This was so stupid that we were not allowed to drink coffee or tea, or that we didn't get the natural experience of just learning how to drink alcohol and all of that. And so it's not uncommon for people who are going through an LDS faith transition to start exploring substances, right? And
right.
From their lattes to their cocktails to, like
Absolutely.
gummies.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes on the one hand, that's great. That's celebratory. Like, yeah, let's grow up. Let's have grown up relationships with grown up things. And I think sometimes we do minimize the risk of addiction or substance dependence, is probably my preferred term. So, so walk us down a little bit of that lane, Amy.
Sure. So I went to get-together socials for ex-Mormons, as we would kind of just be in the group environments of sharing each other's stories, offering each other support. And sometimes people would bring adult beverages and I would drink, and having that being a totally new experience for me, I thought, wow, this is great. And it helps me feel better. and it did. It helped me feel better for a while. And so then what I did is I kept drinking in private to numb the pain that I was experiencing. So I would drink in public, like in get-togethers when that happened. It's not like I was looking for that, but when it happened, I would go and have fun with friends, finding commonalities with others. It was nice. It was honestly that was a great part of my journey, is finding connection with others that understood where I was coming from. But then the drinking to cope, to numb myself and to mask that pain, became a very real thing. And I did a lot of drinking in private until it just got to the point where I was dependent on that. And it was a very difficult time for me, which, I mean, makes sense. But I'm very headstrong. I know this about me, Natasha, but I'm very headstrong. I got this. I can do it. I'm like, I don't have an addiction. I'm not an alcoholic. I just have issues with alcohol. I need to figure out how to make myself stop. But I was literally dependent on it. And so I really needed to get some help. And I did. I went into residential treatment for a while and started tackling some of those layers of pain and trauma that I had experienced with things as an adult, also with childhood issues. And it was a very beautiful and raw process for me that I feel like I developed and got to understand myself a lot better. And that, coupled with my faith journey, is what made me decide, wow, I need to help people in this field in moving forward. And there is just so much there for me that I experienced. And I thought, I'll bet you there's some other post-mos that maybe drank a little bit too much to cope, because there's so many reasons that you can drink to mask pain. And the faith journey is just one of them. Like you said, some people, they'll just read that CES letter, for example, in our faith and call it good. They're like, sweet, I'm out. Like, and then be like, what? I never felt more betrayed in my life. The betrayal was almost tangible. It was so, and I thought my whole identity was wrapped around my faith. And so to lose that, to learn what I did, it was devastating. And so that pain was very real for me. And I drank to numb for it to help until it stopped helping. And then I got help.
Yeah. I really appreciate you being so vulnerable and sharing your personal story on this. I do want to normalize this a bit. I think there is a lot of shame, especially in LDS culture, right? Because I think it's like we were told, don't do it. If you do, you're going to have slippery slope and you're going to become an addict and you're going to become an alcoholic and all the catastrophizing. And so I would say like we know about 8 to 10% of folks who, get involved with substances do end up developing some type of dependence issues. There's a lot of theoretical things as to why that is. But so, yeah, I think a majority of post-Mormons do not get,
Right.
and don't have a problem with dependence, but there is a small part of those who do. And so then it feels like I can just see the layered shame in that. Like, oh, was the church right? Did I, now you're doubting your own faith transition. Am I really going down a path I shouldn't have gone down? Or even if you don't believe that, you're still like, oh, but they're going to say those things about me. See, when they left,
especially
that's because. And so it just becomes very layered. And I just want the audience to know that we take this very seriously. And I'm so glad now to have somebody at Symmetry who is aware of how to work with substance disorders, and really glad to have you on the team for that reason. Lindsay, I know this is not your personal story, but what do you have to share? I know that you are aware of these things and have people that come in, or that, what are your thoughts about substances, and especially as a parent and all that?
Yeah, I mean, it's scary to go from having a religion that gives you all these guidelines. That's one of the things with the parenting, and we talked about that because it feels like these safety rails a little bit. But I do think, there's something, and you even use the language, Natasha, about like growing up and just having that choice, but then with the choice can come these complexities. So I kind of just think this is the reality of like the world that we live in. And the truth is, like, a lot of people that are in the church also, just because you're a member of the church doesn't mean you're not going to struggle with substances, right? Exactly. But it's just probably more hidden, and the shame's deeper and things like that. So yeah, I am starting to see some of this come in, and I just love what you teach with it, Natasha, about like harm reduction. I mean, that I'm kind of leaning into that. And then I feel like I'm learning a lot from Amy about it, because I'm not an expert like with substances necessarily, because I haven't gone through, the addiction program or anything, but I am loving what I'm learning here. And I feel like there's so much value in what Amy brings to the practice, like you said, Natasha. So I'm very grateful, Amy, that you share your story. And yeah, I'd love to dive into it even deeper, but I know we're short on time. But
thank you. Yeah. I just felt like it's too important to share, because of others might be able to benefit in hearing my story, that I had to.
For sure. Yeah.
I have worked. I mean, my career actually started at a methadone clinic in Detroit, Michigan, that had nothing to do with religion or anything. So I was really full blown into substance dependence types of treatments for the first 2 years of my career. But I do think that we do know that shame plays a big part. Genetics can play a part. Family dynamics can play a part. There's a lot of complexities to it. And so again, here at this podcast, we're like attackers of shame, because shame in particular can play a big role in the dependence thing. And I've worked with tons of both members and non-members and post-members who are dealing with a lot of alcohol. Alcohol is pretty common, but even like when is it, when does cannabis start feeling unhealthy usage versus healthy usages? And there are people who daily use that feels very healthy, and people who don't. And, so it gets complex, and like what purpose is it serving, and what is it treating, and what's the difference between healthy coping versus self-medicating? It's not black and white. And we come from a very black and white viewpoint on this. Right. And so, and there's people who get, I've worked with people that are sniffing glue even. There's people who is it kratom? That's the new.
Kratom.
I'm saying that right.
It's got a TH, so it's kind of funky. But
and of course, we know with the pain medications that can really lead to a lot of issues for people. So it is an issue. It's a problem. It's a community thing. There is recreational use for things. There are medical reasons for things, and there's like unhealthy coping, and it's complicated. So I'm super glad we're talking about it. All right, really quickly before we totally run out of time, let's dive into a little bit of how, especially Lindsay, how did faith transitioning start affecting you from a parenting perspective? And I know, Amy, you brought up your 5-year-old too that was asking questions around the baptism time. So tell me a little bit about what that was like for you.
Yeah, well, real quick, I wanted to clarify with my LGBTQ plus kind of journey of my sister, I wasn't a perfect ally. And that's part of why I look back and, wish I could have done things differently. So I don't want to give the impression that like, oh, she came out to me and I did everything the right way, because I was very much still kind of towing the line of a believing Mormon, but it was just a process for me. And to come to like, now I feel I'm showing up in my values of how I want to treat people of all identities. You know what I mean? So I just didn't want to misrepresent that the second she came out to me, I was perfect, because that was a process. And, I've worked before I was here at this clinic, I was at Flourish and worked in a parenting support group for parents of LGBTQ plus kids. And it's just a very complicated place to be when you're in a belief mindset, but you have someone that you love that is LGBTQ plus. So I feel like I can come at that from a very understanding perspective, really on any end of the spectrum where people are, and trying to make sense of it and trying to love the people in their lives, maybe still while believing or maybe not, like how do we make sense of this? But so there's that. And then it kind of does lead into the parenting thing for me, because I just remember really feeling when I started to deconstruct more, a few years down the road, just feeling like, well, what if I did end up having a child that came out as LGBTQ plus? Like at the point I was kind of like, well, we could stay in for the community. But I started to realize that I can't filter what my kids are hearing. I can filter what I'm hearing, and I can like find the good here, and especially in the people, because I think people are people, and anywhere you go, there's wonderful humans, and it's no different in the church. Like there's wonderful people there. But I started to, feel like you kind of said, Natasha, earlier, like kind of like if you don't fit a certain mold, the church sometimes just isn't a safe place for you. And with what I had known and kind of the deconstruction and my beliefs had changed, I just came to a place where I didn't feel that we could stay in anymore, like in a traditional sense. So it was really a hard process, and there's a lot more to go in on that, but I found some really great books, and I've kind of like becoming a therapist and learning trainings and stuff. I love acceptance and commitment therapy, because it really leans into personal values. And what I did looking back, I'm like, that's what I was kind of doing without even realizing it, is identifying personal values that were important to me in the church, but that could also still be part of my life and a part of my parenting and part of what I taught my kids out of the church too. So I started to just really lean into being authentic and like seeking beauty in our lives and seeking things that fill us with joy and, good people surrounding us and things like that you can find in and out of the church. It was just really hard for a few years to untangle that, could that be a reality outside of the church? So yeah, anyway, there's a lot more to go into, but just there's a book called When Mormons Doubt by an author named John Ogden, and he is involved in a program called Uplift Kids. So that's one resource I would point parents to if they're looking for some kind of framework or structure to help. There's like little lessons, but his book, he really focuses on truth, beauty, and goodness. And he shows you how in the church, they kind of do a good job at showing you those things, but you can also have that out of the church or really wherever you land. So that really helped me. And here I am today, 5 years down the road, in the fear of stepping away. Like, we're okay. My kids are nothing's perfect. My kids are doing pretty well, and we're doing pretty well as a family. And I'm grateful that I kind of followed my inner intuition with all of that. So,
yeah. One of our listeners popped up right as you said ACT. Roy Leanne says, love ACT. Psychological flexibility is a skill we never learned in the church. And
exactly.
With that. Amy, your thoughts on what did you notice happening as you were transitioning, and now how you're going to lead your kiddo?
It was interesting. I love that Lindsay brought up values, because I was so torn on, especially being a single mom at that point, wanting to help raise my daughter in a good way, full of good values, but at the same time understanding her father's identity and not wanting to have trying to limit any shame for the LGBTQ community, at all. So just really trying to instill the right values in her, whether it be, being honest, live with integrity, do all of these things that are important. And I remember once asking her if she missed going to church, and She didn't. I was kind of surprised by that. She didn't. She's like, Mommy, you can teach me what I need to know. I'm like, oh, okay. That was just her fun statement. I thought, okay, yeah, you're right. I'll teach you what you need to know. But it was a moment of, oh, I don't have to do it's quite as much as I thought that I would need to. Like I was already feeling the burden of being a single mom and trying to be the congregation, the instiller of all these good values. When she summed it up really nicely, and I thought that was beautiful. She has a talent for that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, I think this is a very disorienting part of faith transitions. I think, for good or for bad, churches play a big role in raising kids, and it can feel, like a nice backup support safety net for parents. Right. And, it kind of like, to borrow Hillary Clinton's term, takes a village. I think she's the one that came up with that. Maybe she was quoting.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But I think she was actually quoting African things that like African tribal, some type of mantra or something that came from that culture. But yeah, so we do, we rely on community to help us. Parenting is hard. And so to feel like not only am I potentially losing the community and the activities and the group, get-togethers, and a lot of churches have great youth programs. The LDS Church has a very, from children to the time that they leave teenage land, they've got programs all along. And I know living in Wichita, Kansas, there was tons of churches that had youth programs and youth camps. And, so it's very helpful for parents to feel like they have that kind of a setup. So you're not only letting go the community aspect, but now what values am I going to teach? What ethics am I going to teach? Again, Mormonism gives you a pretty good curriculum. Don't date until you're 16. Don't do this. Don't do that. Do this. Do that. And so, and now you're having to complete. It's more complex because it's not just a to-do list or a not to-do list that most of us want to give our kids. We want to give them complexity and ethical thinking and morality, and it can feel overwhelming for sure. And I have 4 kids myself, so I've been through this. I have a queer kid, a trans kid, that definitely was part of our faith transition as well. Yeah. How do we talk about current, it's not just in religion these days, it's current politics and ideas and values that are very much being influenced by, I think, a lot of Christian nationalism and a lot of other types of religious, ideology. And it can feel a little bit blah.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's my clinical term for today.
Yeah.
Relate to that. I think we could relate to that. Another resource that I would put out there. So John Dehlin of Mormon Stories and his wife Margie Dehlin and I came up with kind of the Mormon faith crisis, gift of a Mormon faith crisis. They more than me, but I was very involved in it. And there's several kind of segments of that are based particularly on parenting. So I'm going to make sure and link to that as well. So
I think I re-listened to your parenting one on that like 3 or 4 times and took notes. I'm not kidding. Yes. So yes, I meant to throw that out there as a resource too. Very helpful for me.
Okay, good. So yeah, well, that brings us to the end of today, but I think any last minute thoughts from you, just both of you, on faith transitions in general? Like what's a final thought or mantra you'd like to leave us with?
I would just say there's, just hope. Like there's a lot of hope. I mean, I think I mentioned earlier, I just was down and probably looking back, actually depressed for a couple of years because I lost my identity. I lost my community. I lost so much and just the framework for what my life was going to be. But I feel like I don't like to use the term happy necessarily, but I'm feeling more fulfilled than probably I ever have and more myself than I ever have because I'm feeling like I'm living authentically and I feel good about the values that we're instilling in our children. And so I think there's a lot of hope, but it can feel very disorienting. And so that's why we're here. Is I love to give people support through this, because it is so big and heavy. And I had a therapist support through a lot of this. And so I just would love to be that for other people.
Love it. Amy.
That is a great summary right there. There is so much hope that can come from it. Like there is something in the beginning that can feel so dissettling, feeling like you used to know all the answers, and then suddenly you don't know what's up. And it can change in time to where we can learn more about ourselves and about others and humanity, that we, in a way, in an approach that would not have been done before. And life is again beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love it. Another book that I would put out there is Parenting Beyond Belief. I really enjoyed that book as well. I forget who the author is, and it's actually it's every chapter is written by a different person, so it's kind of an interesting mix of different people's ideas. But thank you so much for both of your time to come on here. I am so excited to have both Amy and Lindsay as interns at Symmetry Counseling. We love having you all here, and you bring such rich, both personal and professional experiences to our community. So if you're struggling with faith transitions, please know that it is normal to do so. It is difficult. A lot of times, especially if you're not working with a therapist who comes from that, or at least an understanding of it, people can be confused. Like, lots of people change churches. What's the big deal? But we do know through the research that the more high demand and high control religion is, it is actually very disorienting versus, if you come from a more progressive or liberal church, it's not that big of a deal to leave or to, join a different church or to leave religion altogether. But it is very, very taxing relationally and mental health wise when you come from more high demand systems. So it is not a small thing. And it's important to find professionals who are trained and who understand that and who can help you navigate that. So another resource I'm putting out there, if you don't want to work with us for whatever reason, or we don't have a licensed clinician that can help you in whatever state you're in, although we do some coaching around faith transitions as well, regardless of where you live at Symmetry. Another resource is the Mormon Mental Health Association. And they have a referral list of lots of clinicians who are also very adept at doing this type of work. So hopefully we've given you some thoughts, some resources, some help. And if you have any further questions, reach out to Symmetry Counseling, where simcounseling.com is our website. And we can either help you find somebody on our team or refer you to other places that we're aware of. So we'll talk to you both soon. And everybody, I hope happy holidays. I'm not sure I'll be podcasting before the holidays are over. So have a good one, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Natasha.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. Thousand years inside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Nahotisch geschehen alone. So we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Nahotisch geschehen alone. We can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart.